Okay. Good morning officially, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday. Welcome to History 12. And there was something I was going to sort out here. Oh yeah, okay, I did do that. Okay, good. Good. Right. So, hello, good morning. Let's do some history, okay? So, yesterday we were talking about these kind of new developments at the end of World War I, right? And it was one of those new developments there was a huge amount, right? Socially, culturally, technologically, there was all kinds of things that were happening at the end of World War II, kind of at the beginning of the 1920s. But one of the things that was, one of the other innovations that were appearing were political innovations, right? And so, again, we have two brand new political systems come out of this period, which is wild, right? You don't see that every day. We only have a certain number of political systems in play, and to have two of them come out at the same time is a pretty big deal, right? And so we talked a little bit about this political spectrum yesterday. It was yesterday, right? Yeah. The left wing and the right wing, and what that actually means, right? And we said, of course, people on the left were a little more open to diversity, a little more, they're more interested in new ideas and change and things like that. They're more open to immigration and diversity and gay marriage. But also, people on the left are more comfortable with government intervention in their lives, right? So support programs, pensions, all kinds of things. But on the opposite side are people on the right, right? And they're more interested in tradition, they're more interested in the nation, they are more interested in kind of people being left to do their own thing, right? They think the governments shouldn't be fussing in everyone's life. They shouldn't be trying to regulate everything to death, right? Just let the market work as it should. Let people make their own choices and take care of themselves, and just stay out of my business, kind of thing. And so, as a result, people on the right tend to like lower taxes. They don't like a bunch of social programs that they have to pay for. They think people should kind of more or less take care of themselves. So again, it's kind of like two types of parent, right? Do you want the type of parent who's always there, always supporting you, very involved in your life? Or do you want the kind of parent that, gives you a little more space and says, you take care of it, don't, you're a big boy or girl, you handle your own stuff, right? So it's kind of like that for the political spectrum, more or less, right? I said that most democracies kind of live in the center, right? So we don't, most democracies have people who lean a little bit to the left and people who lean a little bit to the right. Yes, there are some communists in Canada. Yes, there are probably some fascists too, but they're very small groups of people, right? And so for political parties, if you're in charge of a political party, you want to be close to the center, right? Because the further out you go, really the fewer people are there, right? So we have a communist party in Canada. There's probably like 300 people that are members of it. They don't run any candidates. They don't get any votes. They're nothing, right? Because there's just nobody in Canada is really interested in communism, right? So if you want the votes are in the center, right? And so for us here, we have a Liberal Party, which is basically dead center. We have a Conservative Party who's leaning a little right. We have an NDP party that leans a little left. And people kind of slot themselves in where they go. But again, it's all pretty close to the middle, right? I said the US kind of leans a little bit to the right, but they've been kind of splitting in two, right? And both sides are going further out than they've gone before, right? Particularly the Republicans, who are starting to lean pretty heavily right. And so I don't know what's going to come of that. It's a little scary, to be honest, living right next door to, a big, powerful country that is, about to have some sort of identity crisis. It's a little scary for Canadians up here, but we'll see what happens. So democracy, of course, we know, power to the people and the rule of law above everything, right? Nobody is above the law in a democracy, or at least if it's working correctly, nobody is above the law. Communism, we said yesterday, came from Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They were writing kind of in the late Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, saw capitalism as an exploitive system and wanted the workers to change that, right? And so they were kind of big on revolution. The workers had to realize that they were being taken advantage of by factory owners, by the bourgeoisie, right? The proletariat, the worker had to realize this, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and take control of things for themselves so that they could share things equally, right? Marx thought that was fair, right? What was happening in Britain and France and places like that during the Industrial Revolution, they thought that wasn't fair, right? Some people were getting wildly rich, and lots of other people were being paid just enough to barely live, right? And even though it was their labor that was making these things happen, right? It was their labor that was making the profit. So we'll get to the communists a little bit later on, of course, when we get to Russia. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but you saw those yesterday. What we were kind of dealing with yesterday and what we'll deal with today is fascism, right? And so we said that fascism was a little tricky to, I'm just going to turn to the right page here. Fascism was a little tricky to put your finger on, right? Because, again, it's really more about what it opposes than what it supports. And it's not really a defined ideology. It's not a real kind of set of beliefs about governing. It's kind of people who do things and then justify it later, right? And I think we read yesterday when we read that section on Italian fascism that part of the fascist ideal is that you have to be seen to do something, right? Something needed to be done. We need to do something, right? Take action, right? Get out there and take action and then explain it later somehow. So the communists, of course, are more organized. They know what they're trying to do. Democracies have kind of an ideology. They know what they're trying to do. Fascists are kind of making it up as they go often. And that's definitely true of Mussolini. It's kind of somewhat true of Hitler as well, but we'll get to him. What were some of the things that defined fascism? And I'm looking at page 36 in the textbook. What were some of the things that defines what fascism is? There were all those bullet points. What were some of the things right, the idea that the state is greater and really more important than the individual, right? And so whatever rights or freedoms you may think you have, they're kind of subject to the state approval, and they can be taken away in the service of the state, right? What else do we know about fascists based on this? Okay, yeah, the idea that the state is kind of like this, it's almost like another being, right? Like it's almost alive, and it's not, it is the people, but it's also not, it's something greater, right? That the people kind of serve in a way. Yeah, that's true. What else do they say? Anna, give me one.
The government was like a big contract, and it was like this charismatic leader.
Yeah, fascists usually have one kind of charismatic leader who is kind of charting a vision for the future, right? Maybe he's Mussolini, maybe he's Hitler, maybe he's the Red Skull from Hydra. Either way, one man with a vision, right? Mir, give me another one. Right? A government that aspires to control the individual within the state. So not only is the individual kind of below the state, but the government is going to try to control every aspect of what people do and think and see and feel, right? So fascist governments often lean toward totalitarianism, right? The idea that the state has control of every aspect of people's lives, right? And that's something that democracies don't really do. Communist states sometimes do, but not always. But yeah, they want to control every aspect of people's lives. David, give me another one. Yeah, so remember that the fascists thought that, at least Mussolini's fascists, thought that Italy's problems were caused by democracy, right? You're handing over power to the ignorant masses. You're giving power to people who don't know what they're doing, right? They don't understand how economies work. They're not informed about the issues. Of course you have a mess. These people don't know what they're doing, right? Fascists believe that they are a heroic elite, right? So the government is made up of people who are smarter and braver and stronger, people with more vision, right? And they're kind of, yeah, they're portrayed as heroes in a way, right? Better than other people in some way. Regina, give me another one. Oh yeah, does it say that? Or it's okay. It's very true, right? So fascist governments are single party states, so there's no other political party in a fascist state usually, and they are above the law, right? They kind of say what the law is, and then it just is that. There's no kind of recourse. So that's very different from a democracy, right? Where even here in Canada, in theory, political parties, political leaders have to follow the law, right? They don't get to just do whatever they want. But fascist dictators often do, right? They kind of become the law. Whatever they say, that's what we're doing. Right? Ryan, give me one more. Right? We have a political structure with only one political party, no challengers, right? Nobody to kind of take power or borrow power. Good morning, Kenny. Avitesh, give me one more. Right? A dictatorship, so kind of a one-party state with one person who's kind of making all the decisions, and his power is often written into the Constitution, or the Constitution's been thrown out, but it's supported by the military, right? And if anyone challenges him, the military will come to his defense, right? Anna, give me one more. Right. So fascists are very comfortable and in fact like using violence, right? Sometimes in warfare against other nations, but often against members of their own state, their own people, right? They're very comfortable using violence to scare people into doing what they want them to do, into punishing people for not doing what they want them to do. Very comfortable with violence and almost glorify it in a way, Um, Fascists are tough guys, right? They're macho, tough guys who will fight it out, right? That's kind of who they are. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing that comes about in Italy and will come about in Germany a little bit later on, right? This idea that, yeah, democracy doesn't work. We don't want a monarchy. What are we going to do? You know, unemployment is high. The country's in chaos. Communists are trying to take over the government. Somebody's got to do something, right? Somebody's got to step up and restore order, right? And that's where guys like Mussolini come from, right? They're like, I'm going to step up. I'm going to take control with my band of thugs behind me. I'm going to reestablish order, right? And people do support them, right? Because when things are chaotic and not going well, people want order, right? Do you think people want chaos? No, nobody wants chaos. They want order, right? They want organization. And so that's often an attractive thing about fascists, is that they promise to restore order, right? Things are crazy, I'm going to make them not crazy. People are breaking the law, they're going to pay, right? People are taking advantage of us, we're going to be great again, right? And I will take us there. And again, considering, you know, this sort of social and economic situation, that can be a very persuasive argument. It can be very attractive, right? Fascists are very good at doing that kind of thing and providing simple answers to questions, right? A lot of, you know, what's going on in Italy or what's going on in Europe, that's complicated, right? There's complicated social and political and economic factors, right? But fascists always have the easy answer. Fascists will always tell you, here's the problem, it's this. And there's an easy fix, this. If only someone were brave enough to do it, right? That's kind of how the fascist works. And again, it's very seductive, right? It's very tempting to want to go along with that, right? In a world that's chaotic, in a world that's uncertain, in a world that's scary, right? And maybe a little out of control. It's very seductive to hear some tough guy get up there and say, look, there's a very simple problem and a very simple solution. All we need is someone with the balls to do it, right? And that's kind of that's how they work, right? They kind of work off this idea. And so, yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah, and so Mussolini is kind of, that's weird. Mussolini is kind of one of these strongman types, right? And he gains a following not because he's the smartest guy in the room necessarily, but he's charismatic, right? He can speak to the people, right? He gives good speeches and he riles people up, right? He kind of knows the right thing to say, right? He's good with the crowd, right? He knows how to get the crowd on his side. Again, he's not much for ideology, right? He starts out as a left-wing writer. He changes sides later and starts being a right-wing writer. He's an actor earlier on in his career. And it's not really so much about what he's saying, but how he's saying it. And again, he builds a following this way because people are upset, right? And scared and want order, right? They don't want chaos. And that's what Mussolini promises to them. Now, we read this yesterday, and some of the things I've told you about Mussolini and about fascists, do they remind you of any current or recent political leaders?
Trump.
Yeah, well, why do you say that?
Making America great again. Doesn't this sound like something?
It very much does, right? That was his whole campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again." And I'm sorry that I kind of used that phrase, but that's really what that's really what fascists tend to do, is they use that same kind of narrative, right? Once we were great, now things aren't going well, right? We were screwed over, or we were taken advantage of, or just bad luck, but I will make us great again, right? And so, yeah, he was that whole "Make America Great Again." I think it still was great, or at least it was as great as it ever was. Maybe, I don't know. Who even knows what great means? But yeah, he did that, right? And so I think there are some parallels between these two guys, right? And I don't know if that makes Donald Trump a fascist or not. I mean, we probably all have our own opinions about that. Or maybe we don't care about him anymore. Maybe we're just happy not to have to hear about him every day. How do you guys feel? Do you feel that way? I feel like every day we had to hear about him. Like every day every day there was something else that he said or did. And it's like you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, what horrible thing did he say or do today? You know, but it's kind of been a nice, it's been kind of a relief, I think, anyway. But they are kind of similar, these two guys, right? Neither of them, and fascists are kind of like this, but Mussolini and Trump didn't really have any strong ideology guiding their actions. They kind of made it up as they went, right? They just decided what they wanted to do and did it. They weren't really sort of confined by political ideas or beliefs or whatever, right? They just kind of did as they wanted in whatever way seemed to work for them, right? And again, fascists are like this, right? They kind of take action first, and then they kind of explain it later on, right? They're both actors, right? So both Mussolini was an actor earlier in his career. Donald Trump, of course, became famous for pretending to be a successful businessman, which I don't think he is. But he pretended to be in real life and on TV, right? So he's got some acting background too. Both of them were good public speakers. And when I say good, I mean that they drew an audience, and the audience kind of got into what they were saying, right? And so Mussolini could do this, and Trump, even though I don't quite get it, he was able to as well, right? People would come out to big rallies, and still do, to hear him speak. Even when he wasn't running for, even when it wasn't an election, people came out to hear him, right? And would boo and cheer and all kinds of things, right? So good public speakers. And again, they're all kind of about their own personal way of seeing the world, right? They're not about serving the greater good. They're kind of very ego-driven, and at least Mussolini is, and I think we could probably agree that Trump is as well, right? Very driven by his own ego and sense of, you know, whether people are properly respecting him or not. Again, does that make Trump a fascist? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter right now. Hopefully it won't matter in another 2 years, but I guess we'll find out. But what I'd like to do here is I'd like to leave Italy, and I'd like to kind of focus on Germany. I think Germany is kind of the bigger story in Europe in kind of the mid-20th century, right? Italy is there. Yes, they turned to fascism. Yes, they participated in World War II. But I think we would all agree that Germany is the bigger story, right? So we'll focus on them. And we know, of course, that the U.S. had a wild and crazy decade in the 1920s. All kinds of cultural and social and technological developments. The U.S. was flying high, right? Until the Great Depression, but for a while, things were great. But in Germany, not really so much the case, right? Germany had just finished World War I. They didn't really have the economic boom that the U.S. had. They had reparations to pay. They had infrastructure to rebuild. They had lost a bunch of territory that was very useful for making money for them. And so they weren't really they weren't really in a great position in the 1920s. And that's kind of what we'll look at now. Okay, so this part of the text here will take us partway through the 1920s and 1930s in Germany. It's not as long as it looks because I don't want you, in that section there's some purple sections, and you can just skip over the purple sections, so it's not as much as it looks. Yeah, so I'd like you to read this section and then answer 3 questions on page 48 and 49, okay? Again, kind of setting us up for the entrance of Adolf Hitler, okay? So I'll let you start reading, and then, of course, we'll talk about these questions once we're done reading, okay? And if you're online, this section of the text is in Microsoft Teams as well, where it normally is. So. Drank that through my mask. Okay, people. So, as you can see, or as you've read about, total chaos, right? It's not. Germany is not in a good situation. What's going on here for the Germans after World War II? What are some of the kind of what's happening
After World War II.
after World War One? Sorry.
Huge debt, huge loans, huge destruction had to rebuild. Nothing good.
Yeah, nothing good, right? There's reparations to be made, right? They have to pay back France and the other allies for the war. How does that go?
Not good because you can't, and they're not working in the international market.
Oh yeah. So
It's hard for them to stay.
right. So not only do they have no money left, which, all the Europeans are or all the European nations are bankrupt, they have no more money, but their goods don't seem to be selling on the world market. Why not, do you think?
There's nobody like.
Yeah, because nobody likes them, right? They just spent 4 years trying to kill the Hun, as they called them, right? The vile Hun, trying to defeat the Germans, and now they're going into a store and they're going to buy something that says "Made in Germany." I don't think so, right? And so yeah, people aren't buying the stuff that they're producing, right? So not only is their bank account very low, but they can't seem to make any money selling to the international community because the international community doesn't want their goods, right? So what do they kind of do? Who do they kind of partner with?
Soviet Union,
With who?
Russia.
Yeah, with Russia, or it's kind of in the process of becoming the Soviet Union. It's kind of a gray area at the moment. But yeah, they partner with Russia because we haven't really talked about this, but Russia is in the middle of its own crisis, right? So they don't have any money either, and they're all starving. Oh, and they're having a civil war at the same time. So it's pretty awful and chaotic over there. And so Germany and Russia try to help each other out a little bit, right? So the first question I'm asking you here is, actually, I'd like to jump right to question 16. Why are there so many political crises for this new Weimar government? They called it the Weimar government because that's where the government met. It was in a city called Weimar, Germany, so they called it the Weimar government. So after the war is over, the Kaiser leaves Germany and they kind of create this democratic government in Weimar. That's why it's called Weimar government. Why are they having, what kind of crises are coming up? What kind of problems are occurring? What's happening here? Can you give me one thing that's happening?
Extremely chaotic political status. Everyone tries to be their leaders, but no one can really do anything about it.
Okay, so there's lots of political parties trying to get things done, but nobody's getting anything done, or what did you mean there?
No one's really doing the things they promised, like to solve the huge debt that they have to pay, or to solve anything, like to get income for everyone. No one's doing that.
Yeah.
Really.
And that's probably worth saying as well, right? Is that, the German public really doesn't support the German government at all, right? The German government now has all of these obligations, right? They have to hand over land to France and to other allies. They have to start these reparation payments, right? And the government's trying to figure out how to do all this. But meanwhile, the people are like, we don't like that. We don't want to pay this. What the heck is going on, right? So the government's trying to move in one direction to fulfill its obligations, and the people are like, no, we don't want to do this. Why are we doing this, right? So there's kind of that going on, but also there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, which are not getting fixed, right? Or not really happening. What else is going on for this? What else does this government have to deal with? Regina, give me one thing. Or one more thing, I guess. This government's got 99 problems. What's going on here? Bottom of page 41. Political chaos characterized the first 5 years as communist and right-wing factions strove to topple the government in attempted coups. What does that mean in English, regular English? What does that mean? Mir, what does that mean? No? Okay, let's start from the back of the sentence. What's a coup?
When the government takes over, or the army takes over.
Yeah, usually it doesn't have to be the army, but yeah, somebody overthrows the government and takes control. Usually you need the army to help you do it. But yeah, so people are attempting to overthrow the government and take control. Who's attempting to do that? Who's attempting to do that? There's two groups. There's communists and fascists, right? So there's people on the far right, the fascist groups, people on the far left, the communist groups. They're both trying to overthrow this government who's kind of roughly in the center, right? The government's trying to get their things done, as Kenny mentions. That's not really happening, right? Nothing's really getting done. The government actually does get overthrown a couple times, right? Temporarily. I think they said the communists managed to take control for a few days before they're thrown out again, right? Fascist groups are trying to take over the government. Hitler's not Bavarian Nazi Party tries to take over the government, right? Turns out it's kind of a stupid plan and they fail spectacularly, but they try, right? So everyone's trying to, these political parties are fighting in the street. They're trying to overthrow the government. That's what a putsch is, by the way. A putsch is an overthrow of the government. So I guess a coup is a French term, and the putsch is a German term, I think, maybe. So everyone's trying to overthrow the government. They're struggling to make these debt repayments, like Avatej told us. They don't really have the money to, but they can't really sell their products on the international market because nobody wants them, right? Meanwhile, there's a depression happening, right? Or at least they're headed into a depression. Where's all their money coming from at this point in time? Or who's pumping money into them?
The Wiener.
Yeah, the government, but who's pumping money into the German government? Da 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 da. Okay. U.S. National Anthem? No? I was singing it perfectly. I don't know what you're... Anyway, the Americans, right? The Americans are really the only major country left with money, right? So they're pumping money, lending money to the German government so the German government can try to keep things going, right? But again, they're struggling to make these repayments. They can't make any money. They're trying to make a deal with Russia. The people are unhappy and fighting in the street. People are trying to overthrow the government, and they're kind of succeeding sometimes, but then the government manages to throw them back out again. Holy smokes, right? This is a chaotic situation. How's the government kind of being run at the time? it's supposed to be a bunch of political parties voting on things, but what kind of happens more often than not?
Street fight.
Yeah, there's definitely street fights outside. Who did I see footage of? It's Taiwan, right? Taiwan that's had like full on, like in their legislative assembly, they've had full on like fist fights. Have you ever seen that?
Yep.
It's wild. Those people are passionate about their democracy. I like it. Right, but people start, chancellors, and they start ruling by emergency decree. What do you think that means? What's a decree? Google it. I'm going to Google it. I think we know what emergency means. What's a decree? What's it say?
An official order issued by a legal authority.
Good, an official order issued by a legal authority. So if the chancellor is ruling by emergency decree, he's basically just giving orders, right? So we've got all these political parties in parliament. They're debating and they're voting. Nothing's getting passed. Nothing is happening. So the chancellor is like, you know what, guys? This is what we're doing, right? It's an executive order, if you want to use the United States terms for it. An emergency decree. Basically, the chancellor is just making decisions and putting them into law, right? No debate, no voting. That's not working. We got to do something, so this is what we're doing, right? And so as this kind of decade goes on, there's a lot of economic chaos, right? So they say that unemployment is getting to like 30 or 40%. Ridiculous, right? Again, if Canada ever gets there, I hope I never see it because it's all over, right? That's bad. I said in Canada we have unemployment between like 5 and 8%. If it starts to go closer to 8, people start to get nervous, right? So 30 or 40% is catastrophic, right? So there's all these kind of things happening, people fighting in the streets. The chancellor is ruling by emergency decree. He's just making decisions, right? Because the legislature, the parliament can't seem to come to a decision on its own. Again, there's political parties fighting in the streets that they have to use the military to kind of calm these people down. It's a little chaotic, right? But you can see how this is kind of paving the way for a dictator, right? Because what do especially fascists, what do? They rule by decree and they use violence, right? They use the military and the police to kind of force people to do what they want. And so this is kind of already happening, right? It's just happening in a democracy because the democracy isn't working, and so they're kind of forced to do things this way just to kind of keep some sort of order, right? But again, it's going to pave the way for someone who, isn't ruling that way because they have to, but ruling that way because they want to, right? Okay, should we take a little break? I feel like there's glazed eyes. You guys have about an hour attention span, as do I. So let's take a break and then we'll come back, okay? That's my decree. Okay, and we're back. So we're kind of dealing with the situation in Germany after the First World War, and yeah, okay. So let's actually try to come up with a real answer for this question number 16. So why did the Weimar Republic have so many crises or crises in the first part of the 1920s? What's one reason?
Non-useful political parties.
What's that?
Non-useful political parties.
Okay, kind of a tricky democratic situation, right? A bunch of political parties that just aren't working together and aren't kind of able to come to any kind of agreement, right? That's not helpful. What else?
They lost all their money and jewelry.
Yeah, right. Their country is broke, right? Ask any leader or politician. It's much easier to govern your country if your country has money. If there's no money, much more difficult, right? The people tend to get unhappy. So yeah, there's no money. What else?
They lost the areas where they couldn't.
Right? There's areas that they used to use for industry that they used to make money from that now they don't have anymore. What else?
Not welcome to the international market.
Right? Having trouble selling goods to the international market, therefore difficult to generate profit, generate revenue, right? What else? What about all those attempted coups, right?
Unstable political status.
What's that?
Unstable political status, like the government is always changing.
Yeah, right? The government is unstable, right? Imagine how difficult it would be for me to teach this class if I had to worry that Will was going to come running in and try to take over every 5 minutes, right? Or Lindsay, or Tara, or Bijan, right? Can you imagine how difficult it would be for me to teach if I had to constantly like fight another teacher for control of this class? I'd never get anything done, right? So again, people are constantly trying to overthrow the government. That's a problem too, right? Anything else? Oh yeah, at least one more thing. What's the general mood of the people? Unhappy, right? The people do not support the government at all, right? So that doesn't help, right? Jeez, what a mess, right? What a total mess. And so you can see in number 17, the Americans are trying to solve Germany's reparation problems by giving them back the Ruhr, right, which is an area of Germany, but also they're giving them loans, right? The Americans are pumping money into Germany so that Germany can keep its economy going, make its payments, and kind of stay above the waterline, right? Of course, the Americans are making some interest off those loans, right? They're not that altruistic, but still, that's where the money's coming from. But of course, we know that at the end of 1929, right, in the US, the stock market's going to crash. And so all that money that they've been throwing at Germany and Europe, all that money's gone, right? So again, Germany is kind of struggling along. They are floated a little bit by American money, but when the American money runs out, so does German money, right? And so they're going to struggle even harder, right, going into the 1930s. And then, of course, that's going to bring us to our not so good friend, Adolf Hitler, right? So what do you know about this Hitler guy? What do you know about him? He seems to come up very frequently, right? Nobody ever talks about Chancellor von Hindenburg anymore, yet we still bring up Hitler all the time. What do we know about him? Anna, what's one thing you know about him?
He was,
He was what?
Nazis, and he was the leader.
He was, yeah, he was the leader. He was the leader of Germany for a solid 10 or 12 years, I think, right? Kenny, what's something you know about him?
He was a soldier at World War I of Germany.
Right? So he was participated in World War I as a soldier, right? Mir, what do you know? What's one thing you know about Hitler?
He was a fascist.
He was a fascist, right? He's the textbook example of a fascist. He definitely is. David, what's one thing you know about him?
He's a charismatic leader.
He's a charismatic leader.
Yeah, like he good in exercising people and compelling.
Yeah, very, very compelling, very passionate speaker, right? If you haven't seen him speak, I'll show you some video footage, and he is unhinged, right? He's very passionate. Avtej, what's one thing you know about Adolf Hitler?
Dictator.
Yeah, right. He was a dictator, right? So he kind of ruled in such a way that what he said, that was the decision, right? Ryan, what's one thing you know about him?
He's very powerful, so he has his own group of people.
Say that one more time.
He has his own group of people,
Right.
like Nazi people.
Right. So he was the head of a party, right? Of the Nazi party. He had a bunch of people around him, kind of a tight inner circle of, sort of head Nazis, but of course he was the guy, right? He was the guy who was in charge. Regina, give me one thing you know about Hitler.
He was very obsessed with the Aryan race, right? The Jews.
Yeah, he kind of characterized the Germans as the Aryan race, right? And he was very, obsessed is actually probably a good word. Obsessed with kind of thinking about it and promoting it and even purifying it, right? Even though we haven't talked about this yet, what do you think is the kind of, like, for history, what's the most important thing for us to remember about him historically speaking? Like, is there a lesson or a...
Well, I mean, although he did tons of non-good things to the world, but he's a great leader of Germans that bring them out of the traumas from the World War I.
Right. So the idea that he has kind of a dual legacy, right? He does make Germany great again, right? He does kind of pull it out of, spoiler alert, he does kind of pull it out of the chaos that it's in, but we also know that there's a bunch of horrible things that are done in the service of that, right? So yeah, there's kind of there's very impressive parts to his legacy, to what he did, but also some pretty negative ones as well. What else can I ask you about him?
Well, he had a great beard.
He what?
He had a great beard.
He had a great beard?
Mustache.
Oh, he had a great mustache. Yeah, that was a very distinctive thing, hey? I don't know. I don't know what... Was he like trimming his mustache one day and he was like, oh, it went too far, I better balance it out. Oh, too far again. Oh. I know. I assume he did it on purpose. I've seen pictures of him in World War I where he has the full mustache. So he obviously decided on the little one later on. I don't know where that came from. Very distinctive though, right? Nobody will ever be able to wear that style of mustache again. Not that they would want to, but you definitely can't trim your mustache that way. Okay, so we're gonna dig into Adolf Hitler a little bit more tomorrow. I just wanted to, I think I may have said this last week, but I feel like I got a little confused. I would like to have a quiz in this class on Thursday, okay? And so I put it into Microsoft Teams, and I think I mentioned it, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I meant to mention it on Friday, but a lot of people weren't here, and so maybe that threw me, I'm not sure. But I would like to have one on Friday, okay? So I posted the particulars of this quiz in Microsoft Teams. And so what I said was, the way I normally do this is that I have online students and I have in-person students. And there's only, I think at this point, there's really only one or maybe two online students. And so what I normally do is I take care of the online students in like a video chat first. So I do an oral quiz with the online people, and then the in-person people come in a little bit later and they'll write a paper quiz, okay? So Alicia, I think you might be the only online student that I have to deal with, and you've been in my class before, so you kind of know how that works. For online people, maybe what I'll ask you to do is on Thursday, we'll start the quiz at, let's say 10:40, okay? 10:40. So that'll give you a little bit of a break. You can study beforehand, right? You can just do some last minute cramming before the quiz, and then we'll start a little bit later because that'll give me time to quiz Alicia and kind of deal with her, and then I'll come in here and we'll do the paper quiz, okay? Paper quiz will be probably about 5 questions or so. It'll be short answers, so you'll point form things or you'll give me 3 sentences or so of an answer. I can ask you, I said that it'll cover classes 1 to 9, so I can ask you anything that we talked about or read or saw on the screen, videos. The only thing I say is that if it's a video or an article or something like that, I won't pull random details out of it, okay? I will only ask you questions that I've asked you before, right? So, for instance, we saw that video on women's contribution to the First World War, the guy who was sitting in front of the trunk with the vest on, and I will only ask you questions about that video that I've already asked you. So I won't just pull a random detail out. That's not fair. I will only ask you questions that I've asked you before. And the same thing with the text, right? If I haven't asked you a question from the text, I won't just pull random things out, okay? So that will give you a little bit more kind of focus in terms of what to look at. But I can ask you anything within that parameter, okay? Yeah, I think so. Does anyone have any questions about the quiz itself?
How long will it be?
How long? Well, if we start at 10:40, that's a full hour. I'd like to give you about 35 minutes tops, right? It really shouldn't take you a long time to do. I know some people like to sit and think and wait, and I get that, but I also don't want to have something that really should take 20 minutes take an hour, right? So we'll try to do about 35 minutes or so, or 30 minutes. If you need a little longer, I guess I can give that to you, but that should be more than enough time, right? It really, if you're kind of prepared and you're ready to go, you should be able to do it fairly quickly, although Regina's given me the head shake. No? Are you a slow tester? Or a long tester? Don't know? Okay, we'll see. It's tough for me because when I wrote exams in the past, I always, like when I come into an exam, I either know it or I don't. And so I could sit there for 100 years, but if I don't remember it at the beginning of the exam, I'm not going to remember it later. Unless somehow, like, if I was able to talk to someone, then maybe it might come back. But if I'm just sitting there, like, waiting for it to appear, it'll never It'll never come to me. So it's tough. I know some people wait a long time and then somehow they manage to conjure it from their memory, but that never worked for me. So I either knew it or I didn't. But yeah, so about 35 minutes should probably be more than enough. Okay. Other than that, I think that's kind of all I have for you today. I finished a little bit earlier than I meant to, but I'm going to assume that that's okay. Is that okay with you guys if we finish a little early? You won't tell Sarah on me? No? I guess. You're going to keep that in your back pocket in case you need to blackmail me later?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Give me a pause, I'll go test that.
Good strategy. Good strategic thinking right there. Okay, so pack it up then. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll start talking about Adolf Hitler and Germany and Nazis and all kinds of fun stuff, okay? So have a nice afternoon. See you tomorrow.